Okay, hello everyone. My name is Megan Peterson, and I am the primary prevention advocate with Peace River Center Victim Services. So, for those of you who don't know, February is Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. So, for that, we're offering these couple of webinars. So, today we're going to be talking about teen dating violence and how to have healthy relationships as teenagers. So, we'll go ahead and get started. So, first, everyone wants to be in a healthy relationship, but we need to know what that looks like in order to have healthy relationships and be a part of healthy relationships. So we learn a lot of things as teenagers that prepare us for adulthood, but we're not always taught how to be in relationships with one another. People are complicated, and so two people trying to be in a relationship with one another is going to be complicated. It's totally normal to have questions, to feel unsure, to have doubts. And tonight we're going to go over how you can identify a healthy relationship and the things that you should be looking for. So a healthy relationship has trust, honesty, respect, and communication, among other things, but we're going to talk about these topics today. Okay, so starting off with honesty. What does honesty in a healthy relationship look like? So it's when you can believe what the person you're with tells you, and you don't worry what they're doing when you aren't there. So honesty in a relationship, we want it to go both ways. We want relationships to be very mutual, for you to be on very equal footing in them. So on one hand, you want to be able to be honest with your partner about your feelings, your comfortability level, your wants and your needs, and everything else in the relationship. And your partner should respond by affirming and supporting you. And you may disagree from time to time throughout the relationship. That's normal. You're different people, but it should always be respectful and never devolve into an attack on your character. Okay, so this should never be you're bad because you believe this, or you're doing something wrong by expressing yourself and being honest. You should never be afraid to be honest with your partner. So if you're constantly worried about your partner's reaction to something that you might tell them, you think that they're going to be angry or they're going to blame you for something, that's not healthy in a relationship. And so trust going the other way. So that's how your partner should trust you. And then you should trust that what your partner is telling you is the truth. You shouldn't feel the need to check up on them constantly or wonder what they're actually doing when you're not together. Your time apart should, not that you can't be in communication with each other, but there shouldn't be any proving that you're doing what you said you were doing. Okay. And so the next thing we're going to talk about is trust. So what does trust look like in a healthy relationship? It's when you can share your feelings safely, but you don't feel pressured to tell them everything. So again, this is a two-way street. Trust should be mutual in a relationship. So you should trust that you can share with your partner and they will respond in a supportive and affirming way. You should trust you are safe when you're with your partner and that they have your best interest in mind and that they're going to respect your boundaries. On the other hand, your partner should trust you by taking you at your word and not asking you to share more than you're comfortable with. So you're going to be trusting each other with the information you share, but also with the information you don't. So if there's something that you're not ready to talk about that you keep private for a friend or even for yourself, you should trust those unspoken things as well. Okay, and then respect. So what does respect look like in a healthy relationship? It's when you accept one another for who you are and you are considerate of one another's boundaries. So respect should always be mutual, as we've talked about. Equality in a relationship is one of the most important things. So we use the word partner because we want to be inclusive of all couples, but also because it reflects that you should be equals in romantic relationships. One person is not in charge. One person should not hold more power. There shouldn't be any sort of imbalance in a relationship. And when someone respects you, they're going to accept you for who you are. So you should be accepting your partner for who they are, and they should accept you for who you are. So that's going to include supporting your goals and ambitions. That's going to include allowing you to express yourself however you would like with the clothes that you wear, your choice with makeup, your choice with your haircut, the way you speak, the people that you hang out with. Respecting someone is knowing that you are the expert on yourself, so you get to make the decisions. If someone's exhibiting controlling behaviors, that's not respectful. Okay, and so those are just some of the key pillars of a healthy relationship that we wanted to talk about. So the next one is communication, and we want to specifically talk about consent and communication. So I know consent's kind of a buzzword. We hear this a lot, and not everyone's not always sure what it means. It feels like a new concept, even though it's always been important. So let's talk about this a little more. So it's pretty simple. Giving consent is when we tell someone that we do want to participate. And so while it's a simple concept, there are some boundaries that we always want to keep in mind. So you should always ask for consent, first of all. A lot of times it's associated with sex, and while it's very important when engaging in sex with anybody, that's not the only time you use consent. So whether you and your friend are going to play basketball, whether you want to give your younger cousin a hug goodbye, whether you are asking your partner to hold your hand, or if you are asking your partner if they would like to have sex, you always want to receive their consent first. Okay, so you are never required to give your consent. No is always an option. And so we've put it in very big letters in the middle of the screen, just to be clear. And so for instance, if your uncle wants to give you a hug as you leave a family gathering and you are not comfortable, you don't feel up for that today, you are allowed to politely say no, thank you. If your partner is ready to have sex and you are not, or if you and your partner do have sex, but that day you don't feel like it, you're allowed to say no. No one should ever make you feel guilty for not giving your consent, or go ahead and do it anyway after you've already expressed that you're not interested. Okay, and no is a complete sentence. It should end the conversation right there. It does not require any additional explanation. So obviously, when you ask a question, somebody can answer yes and somebody can answer no. So let's talk a little bit more what each of those mean in terms of consent. So when someone says no, it should be respected. If you ask a question, you know that there's a 50% chance that the person is going to answer with a no, and that's a perfectly okay response to have. There should be no guilting or pleading or coercion to follow. So if you say no and they say, oh, but I really, really wanted to go do this with you today, and I'm so upset and you've ruined our plans, and they won't drop it and they ask you repeatedly, even if you were to say yes at that point, you wouldn't truly be able to give your consent. You already gave your real answer. And so people should take you at your word. And you don't owe them an explanation. You don't need to say, oh, I don't feel good, that's why I don't want to do whatever it is, or oh, I have to go, like I have this other thing planned. You don't have to make excuses. It doesn't require an explanation. On the other hand, when someone says yes, there are a few guidelines. So it should be of their own free will without pressure or coercion. It should be a sober and enthusiastic yes. So if somebody is intoxicated in any way, their critical thinking is currently impaired. That means that they cannot actually give their consent. And so you can't take them at their word in this instance. And so you shouldn't be asking them for things that require consent. And it should be an enthusiastic yes. So if they say yes, but they're clearly not interested, you can tell by their body language, by the way they're presenting themselves, that's not a real yes either. And lastly, silence is not a yes. The absence of a no is not a yes. In fact, silence you should take as an indication that they are not interested and that they are uncomfortable. So let's go over some sort of hidden messages that really mean no, because sometimes people have a hard time standing up for themselves, or they may be uncomfortable or unsure. So if people say things like, I don't feel like it, I don't know, I'm confused, I'm scared, I'm not ready to go all the way, let's take our time, I don't feel good about this, you can see that the list kind of goes on. But these are all indications that what somebody wants is to say no, but they don't feel safe to do so. So the best thing to do in this case is to express to them that they can't say no and to go ahead and stop it because you know that they're uncomfortable. On the other hand, if you find yourself saying things like this, but you're not ready to say no, just take a couple deep breaths and just say that simple 2-letter word and say, no, this isn't something I want to do right now. And remember, if somebody doesn't take you at your word for that, they're not respecting you. And so you need to keep that in mind in the future. And then let's talk about actions that mean no. And so we talked about somebody might say yes with their words, but you can kind of tell that they're not actually interested, that they're not actually comfortable, that they're not actually ready to do whatever it is you're asking. So this can look like moving away from you, crying, avoiding being alone with you, reluctance to get in the car, avoiding eye contact. These are all very obvious physical signs that a person is uncomfortable. And so if someone's uncomfortable, you should obviously pull back whatever behavior is making them feel that way. So a sexual violence prevention tip we've got here in the middle of this slide is that communicate your sexual limits firmly and directly before the heat of the moment. So if you're in a relationship with somebody and it's a romantic relationship, you want to go ahead and tell them what you're comfortable with. What makes you feel good, what makes you feel bad, things you've done before, things you haven't done before, and being honest and upfront with that person about your comfortability level. It's going to be easier when you have a planned time to do this versus trying in the heat of the moment when the person is asking you to do something to decide if you're ready and how to tell them if you're not and if they're going to get upset. It can be a really complicated situation. So those conversations before are really important. And if you're not comfortable having those conversations with that person before, then you have to question if the relationship is respectful, if you can trust the person, and if you can be honest with them, like we talked about before. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how to ask for consent, because I know a lot of people feel uncomfortable or embarrassed. They feel like it's an odd thing to do. This is actually not true. In a lot of cultures and a lot of places, even in our own culture, consent is very normal. It's just become a mainstream concept recently, so you might not be as familiar with it, but it's always been very important. Okay, so we've got kind of 4 steps outlined here that we're going to talk about. The first one is to be straightforward. So people can't agree to things unless they have all the information. You cannot rely on implying what you want. So you need to just tell the person. If you'd like to have sex with somebody, you need to ask if they're comfortable doing that. If you'd like to hug someone, you need to ask if they're comfortable doing that. If you'd like to take someone out to a movie and then dinner, you need to ask if they'd like to do that. You don't want to act like you're going to play mini golf and then all of a sudden you're on a 3-hour movie. You need to give the person all the information in order for them to make an informed decision about their comfortability level. Okay, and so explain your intentions fully. Make the person aware of what you want and make them aware that your intention is for it to be a positive experience for both of you. You want to talk about where you expect it to go and what all you want to be involved in the experience. So, of course, things can change, plans can change, things can escalate. But once you've gone past what you already talked about and received consent for, you want to check back in and ask if the person is still comfortable. Now, this is maybe the most important part, but remember you are asking a question. So yes and no are acceptable responses to a question. You shouldn't have an expectation beforehand of what their answer is going to be. They can say yes and you can move forward, or they can say no and you can stop. Both are completely okay to do at any time. Okay, and the last thing we want to talk about is that practice helps. This may feel like an underdeveloped skill, but you've actually been asking people for consent your whole life. So start small. Ask your friends if you can hug them. Ask your parents if you're allowed to come into their room, or your guardians if you're allowed to come into their room. If you want to talk about something serious with one of your friends, ask them if they're comfortable having that conversation before you just, jump into it with that. Get used to making sure that people are actually comfortable with your actions and they know your intentions, and it'll start to come more naturally. So let's talk about, what if someone does something without your consent? So first thing you want to do, if you're safe and comfortable doing so, go ahead and speak up. You can just say, hey, I'm actually uncomfortable with that. Can we stop? Or, no, I actually said, no, I don't want a hug. I was serious. Those short, quick phrases. And if all you can get out in the moment is no, that's totally fine too. So the next thing you want to do is tell a safe adult. Even if it didn't seem like a big deal in the moment, you want to talk to somebody who knows a little bit more about relationships than you and can give you advice, make sure everything's okay, make sure that they're a safe person to be around in the future because they were not respecting your boundaries. So if you're not sure what a safe adult is, they are a person who you can trust and that you're able to get in contact with within a week. So this could be your coach if you're on a sports team. This could be your mom. This could be your grandma. This could be your teacher, your guidance counselor, your youth pastor, your rabbi. It could be any adult. But if you feel like you can trust them, if you feel comfortable talking to them, and if you're going to see them within the next week, you can go ahead and make them your safe adult in your life. So if you're ever in an experience that made you uncomfortable, you try to say no and the person didn't listen, you can go ahead and have a conversation with that safe adult and they can help you gauge the severity of it, what to do next time. And just always keep in mind, it's not your fault. You did everything you could. So it's your responsibility is to take care of yourself the best you can. You didn't do anything wrong. It's not your fault that you didn't make yourself more clear. It's not your fault that they got mixed signals. You didn't give your consent, and it's their problem if they didn't respect that. Okay. So let's talk about what is teen dating violence. So physical abuse can be involved. This is a lot of times what we think about when we talk about violence. And while this is a key factor, it's not the whole story. But to be clear, a romantic relationship should not involve any physical violence whatsoever. There should be no slapping, punching, pushing, shoving, physical restraining, keeping someone in a space where they don't want to be, towering over someone. That's all completely unacceptable and should never happen under any circumstances in a romantic relationship. You can also experience emotional abuse. So emotional abuse is a control tactic. It uses emotions to criticize, embarrass, shame, blame, and otherwise manipulate the victim. It's a consistent pattern of abusive and bullying words that undermine the victim's self-esteem and mental health. And it can warp the victim's sense of reality. So I've listed off quite a few words there. So let's talk about these. So first, criticize. Your partner should be affirming and supportive of you. If they're constantly picking apart your appearance, the way you speak, the people you hang out with, your decisions, that's not okay. That's a form of abuse. If somebody purposely embarrasses you, this is a pretty big red flag in a relationship. Again, your partner should be supportive and affirming. So if they try to use things that they know about you and think that you've been vulnerable with to embarrass you, they make up stories about you. When you're in front of other people, they're constantly making jokes at your expense that make you uncomfortable and hurt your feelings. That's a form of abuse. Okay, if they're constantly shaming you for things and blaming you for things, everything is your fault and nothing is their fault. You caused whatever bad thing happened. That's not normal either. People should be able to take accountability for their own actions. Now, let's talk about this undermining a victim's self-esteem and mental health. So abuse is a pattern, and abusers are doing this on purpose to manipulate. That can sometimes be hard to get your head around because it seems so crazy that a person would do that, but it is intentional. And so that's a tough thing to come to terms with. But, an abuser is purposely going to make someone feel less about themselves so that they accept that kind of treatment. And it can literally warp your sense of reality. Because before the relationship, you knew that you shouldn't have been treated like that. But over time, you start to question things like that. You start to question if maybe everything really is your fault, if you should be in shame, if you deserve that kind of treatment. And of course you don't, but this form of abuse can make you feel like that. Okay, there's also sexual abuse. So this could be extreme forms of abuse such as rape. However, this could also look like coercion, not respecting boundaries, blackmailing you with sexually explicit images or other content, making sex purposely painful, or engaging in sexual activity that makes you uncomfortable. So when you're having sex, if someone is ever going farther than you want, not respecting your boundaries, these are all forms of abuse. It's not something to brush under the rug. It's not because they couldn't help themselves or any of those other excuses. And then financial abuse. So this is another method of control, and it could involve controlling where you work, how much money you make, criticizing you for spending money and forcing you to justify every dollar that you spend, and unequal access to funds in a relationship, okay? So this is meant to increase your dependence and also hurt your self-esteem again. Okay, so as you can see, abuse can look like a lot of different ways, but if you're experiencing any of this, you want to go ahead and talk to that safe adult you've identified. So types of abuse are control, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse and intimidation, isolation, verbal abuse, coercion, threats and blame, using male privilege, and economic abuse. We've already covered a lot of these, but I do want to mention first isolation. So if your partner is really controlling about who you spend time with, they want you to talk to your family less, they're cutting you off from your friends, this is not normal behavior. In a healthy relationship, you still have other friends, you still talk to other people, you still get to foster your other relationships. So if somebody's cutting you off from a lot of loved ones, that's a form of abuse. I also want to talk about using male privilege. So obviously, anybody of any gender can be a victim or survivor of domestic violence or teen dating violence. However, about 95% of survivors are female, and typically using male privilege is a big part of the abuse in how you present yourself, relying on traditional gender roles to control someone. So you do have to keep in mind that this is a societal issue. So it's not your fault, and it's very normal to need to reach out for help. Okay, so when there is domestic violence within a romantic partnership, we call this intimate partner violence. And then when teenagers experience intimate partner violence, we call it teen dating violence. Now, all these forms of violence are very similar, but there are some differences. Obviously, if you're a teenager and you're experiencing this, you're probably not living together, you're probably not sharing a bank account, and you probably still have a guardian that's involved in your life. Okay, so let's talk about some statistics from the CDC. We've all been hearing a lot about the CDC with the pandemic going on, but they've got some data about teen dating violence as well. So 1 in 11 female and 1 in 14 male teens report experiencing physical dating violence within the last year. So this number is not just dating violence in general, it's physical dating violence. So like we talked about, that's being pushed or slapped or shoved in a romantic relationship. So that means if you were in a room with 14 of your friends, likely somebody in there has experienced this. Okay, and then 1 in 8 female and 1 in 26 male teens report experiencing sexual violence in the last year. So young women as teenagers and as college students are among the most vulnerable population for experiencing sexual violence. So it is important to understand consent and to take active steps to protect yourself, but also to recognize that it's not your fault, that these behaviors are not brought on by you and they have nothing to do with you or your character or the treatment that you deserve, because again, abuse is a choice. So 26% of female and 15% of male adult survivors of domestic violence report that their first abusive experience was before the age of 18. So this is why we're doing this. This is why it's so important to help you guys as teenagers learn about healthy relationships, because that's going to lead directly into your adult life. You know, it may not seem that important, it may not seem that dangerous, but these patterns that we experience as teenagers are going to define the patterns we experience as adults. So as an additional note, there are no current statistics on the experiences of students outside the gender binary. So non-binary students, we don't know the statistics on how often they experience teen dating violence. Unfortunately, this is because as marginalized people, the organizations like the CDC aren't collecting that data, which is a huge problem. What I will say is that sexual and gender minorities are always in greater danger of violence. So their numbers are most likely higher than even the ones we see here. Okay, so teen dating violence is a pattern of abusive behavior that one person uses to gain power and control of their current or former partner. So that's a lot to take in, but what I want to focus on is that it's a pattern of abuse. So it's consistent abusive behavior, and again, it's to warp your sense of reality. It's completely intentional and it's manipulative. So it's designed to make the victim believe what they're experiencing is their fault, and so they can't leave. All right, let's talk a little bit about protecting ourselves and others. So if you think you're experiencing teen dating violence, there's a few steps you can take. The first is to reach out to someone. Reach out to your safe adult. You can call Peace River Center Victim Services. All you'd have to do is Google on your phone, Peace River Center Victim Services, and call the number that pops right up. So if you're gonna reach out to us, we can help you in a lot of different ways. We can help you make a safety plan. If you're not sure if you are in an abusive relationship, we can talk you through that, tell you what behaviors are healthy and normal and what behaviors are not, and the next steps you can take to protect yourself. There's also the National Domestic Abuse Hotline. So again, on your phone, you're just going to Google domestic abuse hotline. The number will pop right up and you can have those same conversations with them. These are free resources that are available to you 24/7. Okay, now it's important to make a safety plan. So you want to remember, you don't owe the abuser anything. So it's not like you have to break up in person. It's not like you have to give them a second chance, or it's probably way past that at that point. All you need to do is protect yourself. So this might look like letting your school know so that they can change your class schedules, so that you're not in the same rooms together, making your school know that you need to be escorted to your car, letting your parents know so that they know that this person should not be allowed in your house anymore, letting the person's parents know what's happening so that that person could potentially get some help. You may need to change your phone number so that they're not able to contact you. And you want to get all these things in place before you send that breakup text. And the reason I say breakup text is you don't want to give someone this kind of news in person if you're fearful of their reaction. So of course, this is all leading to ending the relationship, which again, please don't feel as if you need to do that in person. You want to do this in a safe way, which means being away and out of reach of that person. And again, having that safety plan in place first. And don't forget to seek resources. After this experience, we have counseling services, we have support groups. And while it can be a hard thing to admit that you've experienced this, going to therapy and seeking out support can help on your journey to healing and to finding healthy relationships in the future. So if you think a friend may be experiencing dating violence, there are also some steps you can take. So the first is to start a conversation. Like we talked about earlier, you need to be asking for consent about things like this, really about everything. So maybe pull your friend aside and say, hey, I'm a little worried about you right now, and I have some questions about your relationship. Can we talk about that? You don't want to just jump into a conversation like this. You don't want your friend to feel blindsided, and you want them to know what they're getting into so that they can prepare themselves. Remember, your friend is dealing with a lot right now. They're having someone constantly berate them, make them feel like they're doing something wrong. So they're probably going to be a bit defensive. So the best thing you can do is be respectful and understanding. So do your research before you jump into this conversation. So you're going to want to be able to provide resources and support. So do you have those things? Do you know the number to Peace River Center Victim Services? Do you know what a safety plan is? Can you give them advice on giving a safety plan? And are you prepared to be non-judgmental? Your friend might tell you things that seem really jarring about the relationship. Are you prepared to recognize that it's not their fault and to make them feel safe and affirmed while they're talking to you about this. You need to make sure of all of that before you start the conversation. So if you believe your friend is in danger, you need to reach out to someone. So you're going to want to call the Department of Children and Family Services if you believe your friend is in danger. They are professionals who can investigate how safe your friend is, and this is what they do full time. So it's not going to get your friend in trouble, it's just going to keep your friend safe. Okay, so we want to practice empathy. It can be really hard to understand why someone would be hesitant to leave an abusive relationship. You know that they don't deserve that treatment. But remember, somebody who is very smart and very manipulative has been spending a lot of time and energy making them feel that they should receive that kind of treatment. So the best thing you can do is try to put yourself in their shoes and be empathetic to their situation. So you don't want to get frustrated. You don't want to tell them that they're dumb for not leaving, that they just need to get out of there. They might still really love this person. So you got to be patient. Lastly, don't share their situation with just anyone. So you don't want to ever use this as gossip. You don't want to spread it around. Even if you think you're just talking to another friend, this could really break their trust. This is a very sensitive thing. So you don't want to tell other students or peers. Okay. And so just to give you an example of what this conversation could look like, you walk up to your friend and you say, hey, I'm a little bit worried about you. I'm a little bit worried about your relationship. Can we talk about it? They say yes. You say, okay. Do you feel like you're being treated well? Do you feel like you're safe? Because it just seems like your self-esteem has been really low. And I've noticed that you're not doing all the things that you used to love to do and you don't have as much time to hang out. And if they tell you, you know what, yeah, actually, I don't feel very supported and I'm kind of scared of him or her and I'm scared of telling them certain things, you could say, okay, well, that actually sounds like it's not a good situation. It could be really toxic for you. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it might even sound like it's a little bit abusive. If you'd like, I can help you tell your parents or whoever you're comfortable telling. And if they say, no, I don't want anybody in my life to know what's happening, you could say, okay, I understand that. But I want you to be safe. So could we call Peace River Center Victim Services? It doesn't mean you have to do anything right now, but they can just talk to you about the relationship. And then you'd be able to go on speakerphone with your friend and talk to a professional who can kind of help guide you and your friend on the situation. Now, if your friend does express that they're in danger, but they're not really willing to come out of the relationship, they're not ready for that yet, you do want to remember to go ahead and call Department of Children and Family Services. Okay, so we're nearing the end of our presentation, but I want to tell you guys exactly what we do at Peace River Center Victim Services. So we have an emergency shelter. This is somewhere people can stay for a amount of time while they're attempting to leave their abusive relationship. So sometimes this means literally giving up the place where you sleep, and it's a really big step. So one of the ways we can help survivors is by giving them a place to stay in between leaving their old life and starting their new one. So we have a 24-hour hotline. This is the number you'd be calling if you're ever experiencing abuse or your friend is experiencing abuse or you have any questions. An advocate like myself would be able to talk you through that. And it's a totally free service. And if all you ever want to do is call and talk because you're confused or you're scared or you need support, that's what we're there for. So we do assessment of children. And so it might feel silly to be called a child, but that would include teenagers. So we can help assess your safety. We provide counseling, direct services, information referral. So that seems like a big wordy thing to say, but that just means that if we can't provide the services for you, we make sure that we give you the information you need. So maybe you need licensed therapists. We can give you a referral for that. If you need furniture because you're moving into a new place, we can help you find that. And then we also have safety planning. So this is something we talked about being very, very important. Leaving an abusive relationship is complicated. So you want to make sure you're doing it in a way where you're safe and everybody else involved is safe. And so we can help you think through things like packing your bag ahead of time, leaving when someone's at work or in a school situation as teenagers, getting your class schedule changed, making sure your guidance counselor knows what's happening, making sure that they're not going to show up at your house when you're alone or come to your place of work. We do community education. So that's actually what I'm doing right now by going through this webinar. Survivor support groups. So sometimes it's nice to talk with other people who have experienced the same things you have. So we have art therapy and support groups and things like that to provide community. We do professional training. So if you need a new job and you need help getting into a new field because maybe you weren't allowed to work while you were in an abusive relationship, we can help with that. Sometimes you do have to go to court to get an injunction of protection, to get a divorce, to get a restraining order. We can help assist you with that. And so the programs we offer are CPI. So this is Child Protective Investigating, INVEST, and Primary Prevention. So that's sort of all about Peace River Center Victim Services. And as you can see, we serve Polk, Hardy, and Highlands counties. So the numbers are on the screen right now for our 24-hour crisis lines. But don't forget, you can always just Google Peace River Center Victim Services on your phone. All right, well, that's all we have for today. So thank you so much for coming. And just remember to never be afraid to reach out and ask for help.